During autumn 2019, it was my real privilege as regional manager for the Leprosy Mission to be involved with the visit of Philip Yancey to the West Midlands. My name is Alistair Duplessis and I am regional manager for the Leprosy Mission. And as part of my work, I assisted at various venues with the visit of Philip Yancey. Philip Yancey was collaborating with the Leprosy Mission to promote his new book, and I want to say a little bit about that. Now, the image you've just seen on the screen here at the beginning and the end of the little video was a book that was written by Dr. Paul Brand and Philip Yancey, the book that Philip Yancey was promoting last year. The title of the book is Fearfully and Wonderfully, but the subtitle for those who may have missed it is The Marvel of Bearing God's Image. As a doctor and surgeon, this idea of being made in God's image was fascinating to Paul Brand. It was particularly fascinating given the people he chose to serve, those affected by leprosy, seen as the lowest of the low, the poorest of the poor. Paul Brand was the first to discover that leprosy damages the nerves of those affected by it, meaning they could not feel pain. As a result, he ended up having a unique point of view on pain. While most people seek to avoid it, he had spent his entire life trying to create a pain system for his leprosy patients. For Paul Brand, being part of God's creation meant having the gift of pain. As image bearers of God, pain is a critical part of our design. It's clearly important that we bear the image of God, but what does it mean? Have you ever noticed in those passages from Genesis how the author sort of stutters and repeats what he has written? So God created man in his own image. In the image of God he created him, male and female, he created them. There is something important here, something to which the author is keen to have us pay attention. I'm sure, like me, many of you can work out that someone is the son of or daughter of somebody just because they bear a resemblance. Now, it's easy enough to understand what it means to bear the likeness of our family members, but things get complicated when we come to read in Genesis that God created us in his own image. For one, it does not necessarily mean that we literally bear his image. Some of us are short, tall, different skin complexions, differently abled, sex, gender, young and old, yet each of us in some way bears the image of our Creator. It's important to realize that not everyone takes the attitude that each one of us bears the image of God. One of Dr. Paul Brand's most beloved patients was called Sedan. He met the Brands too late to save his feet. They were only stumps. A bus driver humiliated him and threw him off a public bus. Hospitals turned him away, stating, "We don't treat lepers here." When he had no place left to go, he travelled to the Brands Hospital in Vellore. Now, usually leprosy patients in India are Dalits, that is, the lowest of the low in the caste system. But Sedan was actually middle class and had trained as an accountant. He was also one of Dr. Brand's keenest patients. He was prepared to be a guinea pig for Dr. Brand as he attempted to work out the best ways of restoring mobility to hands and feet. Due to the nerve damage in his hand, Sedan could not be operated on without anaesthetic, staying awake through the entire process and being quite captivated by it. Brand worked out the best techniques he could, taking tendons from the knee and inserting them into the hands and feet. With physiotherapy, leprosy patients could learn to use their hands and feet again, although they still lacked sensations in their extremities. Paul Brand operated on Sedan and gave him a new lease of life. Now, when he went back to his village, he was praising God for the work Dr. Brand had performed on his hands. After these surgeries, leprosy patients have to take great care, looking after their hands and feet, checking for ulcers, protecting them, etc. Well, that night Sedan fell asleep, and in the night a rat had come and started gnawing at his hand. However, because he could not feel, he awoke the next morning and his hand was a gnarled mess of blood, bone and tendon. He was so distraught at what had happened that the next night he vowed to stay awake so that he could fend off any dangers. In order to keep himself awake, he took out one of his old accounting textbooks to read. Bad idea. He fell asleep and in his movement accidentally knocked over a kerosene lamp near the bed. He suffered third-degree burns and was left with no fingers. He was so disappointed. He returned to the Brands. He was ashamed and felt that he had ruined the beautiful craftsmanship that Paul Brand had created out of his hands. As Sedan unrolled the bandages to his wounds, both he and Dr. Brand wept. And then a question came that stayed with him. When Sedan cried, "How can I ever be free without pain?" The author Philip Yancey describes meeting Sedan in Fearfully and Wonderfully. He recalls Sedan as always being joyful, a glass half full sort of person who spoke in a sing-song voice. After telling Philip of his story, he ended with, "But I am happy that I had the disease leprosy." "But how can you say that?" asked Philip. "That is the most tragic story I have ever heard." "Because," replied Sedan, "if I never had the disease leprosy, then I would have never met Dr. Paul and Margaret Brand, and I would never have known the Spirit of God that lives in them. May that same Spirit live in me." Well, I observed Philip Yancey, just to conclude with, I observed Philip Yancey over several nights on his tour last year in the West Midlands. Each night at the end of the meeting, people queued up to meet with Philip Yancey, to tell them their stories, to share their stories, to tell him how his books had perhaps touched their lives. And each night I saw the patience and the grace that Philip Yancey showed as he stayed there for sometimes quite some hours to meet with people patiently. And I saw that same spirit in him that was referred to in the book. May that spirit also be in each of us, and may God bless you.